You don't think I'm black?
Do you think you're black?
I don't think. I know I am.
Okay. Being white passing versus being white, are they just the same thing?
I am so relieved that I'm not the only one going through this.
If you identify as white presenting or white passing,
you're white.
Welcome to Comfort for Life Network. I'm so glad you're watching. Thank you for stopping by. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe. If you're my returning subscriber, I appreciate your love and support. Leave a thought in the comment section. I'm getting very few comments. Make sure you share your thoughts in the comment section. Let's interact. Am I making sense? Or am I just... Tell me. I want to know. Also, drop your suggestions that you have for the channel. Yeah, let's grow this community. Thank you so much for tuning in. Enjoy the rest of the video.
There is a disparity between the meaning of the language of white passing or white presenting from an Australian context in comparison to white passing or white presenting from an American context.
White passing is an action.
Until I saw her video, I didn't realize that so many people didn't understand the difference. So I feel like I need to try to signal boost and amplify her message because she's exactly right. A lot of y'all think white passing is how people look, and that is not it. White passing is an action that you do intentionally for societal capital and collateral. Basically, you pretend to be white or you allow people to assume that you are white so that you gain the benefits that society gives to white people. White presenting is just a phenotypical descriptor that you are a different culture, but you look like a regular schmegular white person. But when you open your mouth or you express your culture, it is very obvious that you are not a run-of-the-mill regular white person. The difference is palpable, and there's a connotation that comes with white passing that is negative. You don't have control over white presenting, but you do over passing.
You know what? I really wanted to share this story in a more put together way, like as you gaze us, but I think the time is good and my hair is up. Let's just do this. It's candid stories. Stick around. It's interesting if you think. I think it is. My grandmother, who is 100% black, mind you, moved to LA in somewhere in the 50s and 60s. She was very much passing in any terms of the words, and she was married to a doctor who was my dad's adoptive father. So she very much got a lot of benefit from being white in these 50s and 60s society. Funny enough, my dad comes along and he's much darker than her, so he lied and told people he was Hawaiian. Because why not? That's not black. Here's where the story gets kind of tragic. So my grandmother paid to have my great-grandmother moved back into the country to live in their house. My great-grandmother was dark, so she was hired as the maid for the family. Of course, all to keep up with the appeal of my grandma being a white woman and this being a happy white family. So my dad grew up treating this woman as just the maid. They never told him. You can only imagine an adolescent boy being like, clean this, do that, whatever. I wasn't there, but that's pretty much what it was. My great-grandma died when my dad was about 13, and it's then that he found out that this whole time the help was actually his grandma. Tragic. He never got to have a connection with his grandma. He never got to share stories, learn about his past, learn about his history, because she was sworn to silence and pretending, and he was never told that was his lineage, that was his blood. And he's felt guilty about that his entire life. And it was all to keep up appearances of being white passing. It's sad. There's a lot of history here, and I think that's what people keep forgetting in this conversation overall. Not you, but people. This comes off the heels of the video where I was talking about my grandmother being white passing, so stick around to see my parents, I guess, and how she looked. I'd first like to start off by saying that my mom's the only one on this app, so this is gonna be super embarrassing for her, but hi mom! Alright, here it is, the parents reveal! Here's me, my beautiful mother. Yeah, this is us going to see Hamilton. This is my mom, brother, and myself. My brother's pretty light right here, but sometimes it gets darker. This is my dad and my uncle, his half-brother, playing around at Six Flags, acting like they're in jail. My youngest uncle is 5 years younger than me, that's a whole different story. Here's my dad posing with his biological father in the middle, and then his half-brother on the right, who is Nicaraguan. Last but oh so not least is my beautiful grandmother Gina. This is a photo of her from back in the day, and it's so gorgeous. I look at this and I don't see a white woman. I don't know how she was white passing back then. I see somebody who's very ethnic, but maybe I guess not traditionally black, or what people in the 50s and 60s would assume was black, so white it was. She got it.
white presenting is something that you do when you white pass. You are presenting as white to white people. The other really important thing about white passing is that you can only do that if you are a black, indigenous, or other person of color. going out of their way to be perceived as white. Now, for some of us in the Jewish community who are people of color, white passing might be something that you do to protect yourself to survive. Most people who white pass do that for that reason. But a lot of the people using the words white passing and white presenting, while I get the idea is to separate oneself from whiteness, that is not entirely helpful, because you cannot separate yourself from whiteness if you are not a person of color. That is the separation. The separation from whiteness is being a person of color. But conditional whiteness can cause you to alter your behavior. So let's talk about that. How has conditional whiteness caused you to change your behavior?
So in my last video, I'm describing my transracial adoption in broad strokes and broadly talking about my identity. And in that, I describe myself as white presenting. And one of my mutuals, this is no shade to her, I really like her content, she seems like a lovely woman, describes herself as white passing. And I wanted to be clear about the distinction for myself. Simply put, I do not covet whiteness. So I don't want to be using language that implies that I do. And white passing to me sounds as if I am trying to trick people into believing that I'm white, trying to pass some sort of arbitrary test into whiteness, trying to sneak into the club of whiteness. And I'm doing none of that. I don't want to participate in any of that. I think even recognizing that I have privilege because of my lack of melanin, because of my approximation to whiteness, I think that's very important. I'm happy to identify that. I'm happy to call it out and name it for myself. But that's why I like white presenting. It allows me to acknowledge that privilege without acting as if I covet whiteness. In fact, part of what's been difficult about my identity in this regard is that I believe that this discussion of Latina, of Hispanic before that, is a colonized identity that is being ascribed to us in an effort, maybe not entirely consciously, but in an effort to remove the nativeness of part of our identities, a part of our connections. And my bloodline states emphatically that that 60% of me is not only Colombian, but from Bogota, like from the area of Bogota. And the last third of me is Spanish. And so I refuse to participate in being named by a system that subjugated, oppressed, and frankly graped my ancestors into compliance. I don't want to participate in a colonized identity. So this is a conscious and constant conversation I've been having with myself all throughout my life. And so as I definitely want to acknowledge my privilege in being close to whiteness, I reject the idea that whiteness is something to be coveted, that we should be seeking whiteness. So in future, there's absolutely no shade, but just a hard boundary for myself that I consider myself white presenting. And if you're ever describing me, I don't know why you would be, but if you're ever wondering how I identify or how to describe me, it's white presenting instead of white passing. All right?
I grew up being physically and verbally bullied in the Philippines for being black.
Y'all go back and watch that video, please. But let me tell you a quick story time. I had this great uncle. He was white presenting, but not white passing. There is a difference. He was in the military. He was in the Philippines and ended up marrying a woman from the Philippines. Now, I was not alive when they got married, but from what I've been told is when she got to the States and met my great uncle's family, met my family, she lost her shit. I mean, she went off calling everybody the N-word, saying that he tricked her. She thought he was a YT man. I have a very diverse looking family. Yes, a lot of them are light skinned, but a lot of them are very dark skinned as well. So for whatever reason, she stays with him for a couple of years and has like 2 children with him. The children are very, very fair skinned. And from what I understand, the lady was racist this whole time, calling people the N-words, calling their friends the N-words, just completely racist. So now fast forward to all her kids are grown. I'm actually grown. Her kids are grown. They're my age, and they decide to have a family reunion. Now, I didn't go to the family reunion because I didn't really deal with them anyway, and I had something to do. I was friends with them on Facebook, like their children on Facebook, and I saw how whitewashed they were. But what I didn't know was that they were white passing. Not just white presenting. I knew they were white presenting. I didn't know they were white passing. So my mom, my younger brother, and my younger sister all decide to go to the family reunion, and they're all dark skinned. Do y'all know they had the nerve to introduce my mom and my siblings as family friends, not first cousins, not cousins, as family friends, long-term family friends, because they didn't want anybody to know that they actually had black in their family. So when y'all were doing all that debating about, is there a difference between white presenting and white passing? Hell yeah, there's a difference. There is a big difference. You can be white presenting all day, but if you're not faking and hiding the black people in your family, then you are not white passing. So yeah, I just thought that was crazy. Real crazy. Like, if you were gonna do all that, why did you even invite them to the family reunion?
I understand that a lot of people are upset with this video. However, I don't think your responses are justified, if I'm being honest. This discourse of how the terms white presenting and white passing are just ways for racially white, ethnically marginalized people to distance themselves from their whiteness, and utilizing these terms is also harmful in some cases, especially when the history of the term white passing is very different within the black community compared to how ethnically marginalized non-black people want to use it. What I'm trying to say is this discourse is not new, and everything that was said in this video is correct. A lot of people just are new to this and are triggered by it. As a reconnecting indigenous person whose ancestral territory is occupied by the Mexican settler colonial nation state, I am very familiar with how race, ethnicity, and nationality are often conflated in problematic ways, and how this distinction between race and ethnicity is important to make because of how different people's experiences are depending on their race, which is determined by your phenotype and not your ethnicity. And I say this as somebody who can blend in with like the tan Jewish and Italian people. If I am perceived as white in some spaces, that does put me on the racially white spectrum. There's a whole spectrum of white natives, and I'd say I'm probably on there somewhere. And if somebody calls me white, that does not invalidate my indigeneity. If I'm insecure in my own indigeneity, that might trigger me. However, that's not the case for me. And it's not the responsibility of other people to try and articulate the very simple concept that race and ethnicity are not the same thing, and that acknowledging white racial privilege is important. It is not the responsibility of other people to tell me that in a way that's nice or easily digestible for me as somebody with that privilege. This is something that happens a lot within Latinidad discourse, where people will call racially white, ethnically Latina people white Latinos, and the white Latinos get really upset about it. It's just another form of white fragility, and I understand that people are upset with it when it happens, but it is not the responsibility of the people who are simply stating how race works to center the feelings of the people who do have white privilege and don't have the same racialized experiences as other people within their ethnic group. In case if it's not enough to hear it from me, listen to all of the Black Latinos who have been saying this for a very long time. In the words of Alicia Sanchez, white Latinas use white passing to obscure their privilege and complicity in white supremacy in our home countries and in the US, in a way that those of us who are racialized don't get to do. Calling ourselves black passing points out the total absurdity of this concept.
Let's quickly talk about the term white passing, because I saw a tweet that talked about how Halle Berry was white passing, and that, my friends, she's definitely not. White passing is when someone perceives a person of color as a white person. It also happens when a certain member of a racial or ethnic group presents themselves as belonging to another group, which is generally a non-marginalized one. Historically, people have passed as white for their safety, for better opportunities, or in order to escape oppression. Now, obviously, that's just a brief summary and there's much more to it, but what's important to note here is that in order to pass, one must be able to hide or simply not have characteristics or traits most often associated with their particular racial or ethnic group. And in this case, what characteristics does Halle Berry have that could allow her to do that? The answer is none, because she presents as a black woman. See, this is also where the conversation surrounding phenotype comes into play, because Halle Berry doesn't look mixed on sight. Her observable characteristics, so phenotype, make her look like a light-skinned black woman, whereas Meghan Markle's phenotype, for example, is immediately understood as being mixed, to me at least. Now, could they both have benefited from colorism in their spaces? Absolutely, but in no space is Halle Berry seen as white presenting, much less white passing. passing. To give you a better idea, let me give you some visual examples as to where some people did or do pass as white. Anatole Brouillard, for example, a late New York Times book critic, hid his black ancestry for years. White passing, yes. Broadway sensation Carol Channing hid her black ancestry until the age of 81. White passing, yes. On the other hand, Freddie Washington, an actress known for her role in Imitation of Life, possessed all the traits needed to pass for white, but actually refused to deny her heritage and advocated for black people in entertainment. But let's also take a look at some more recent examples. Pete Wentz is white passing. Wentworth Miller is white passing. Jennifer Beals could be white passing. Troyan Belisario could be white passing. There are other examples, but ultimately what everyone should take away from this is that in no world is she white passing or white presenting. I hope that cleared some things up, because if Halle Berry is considered white passing, then so am I, and I can tell you firsthand that my life experiences have not reflected that.
Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate your time. See you. Bye for now. Leave your thought in the comment section. Don't forget, I'm glad you watched to this extent. Thank you so much for tuning in.